dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special edition, we are talking civil rights and gun rights and everything in between. It's going to be quite the show. Remember, Liberty Nation Radio is sponsored by LibertyNation.com. You can access podcasts, breaking news analysis, a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. And you're here on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I am, as ever, your host, Mark Angelides. We're very fortunate to have with us, back in the studio, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire, Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, amongst many other positions. Scott, great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Mark. It is a pleasure to be back. It's been a minute. Nice to be here.
We really had to get you in for this, Scott, because December the 4th, it's kind of went under the radar. But by December the 4th, there was a deadline to have gun rights overseen or become part of or even be paid attention to by the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. And for me, this is it raises a number of wonderful and interesting questions. But before we delve into those, give me your reaction to this.
It's about time. One of my reactions. We'll see if it endures is another of my reactions, and huzzah is another of my reactions. This is
It's very Benjamin Franklin of you. Huzzah!
Yeah. So one of the things that administrations do is they basically put out their values throughout all the bodies of the federal government. And some do this more effectively than others, and some are more interested in doing it through executive order than others, rather than through legislation, for instance. And just in sort of my lifetime, I'll just deal with that as an observer of politics. So Bill Clinton, for instance, and we're talking about gun control, so that's why I'm going to him. What he did was, with the help of the Cuomos, was, for instance, to use the Housing and Urban Development HUD to kind of use that as a vehicle to move gun control. Basically, what they were doing was they were establishing that you couldn't live in public housing unless you had certain basically gun-free zones, and they were going to basically make gun manufacturers comport their gun manufacturing to the administration's wants and wishes, which were notoriously hostile to gun rights, if they didn't want to be sued. Why would the Housing and Urban Development, whose mission is to basically see low-income people get decent housing, do this? Well, it's just because it was a full-court press of all of the values of the administration, and the values of the Clinton administration were hostile to gun rights. And I think we haven't seen that on the right. Not nearly as well used as on the left. So with Obama, you could pick any number of impetuses or policy preferences, and then the full court press. We actually saw, one generation away, the parent company of LibertyNation.com, for instance, was discriminated against by the IRS. Lois Lerner and the IRS pulled our returns and discriminated against us because of our ideas. Now, that was an illegal use of administration power to effectuate their ends, but there are legal uses. And this, wow, did I beat around the bush? This
Only in the best possible way.
Using the mechanism of the Justice Department to see that Americans' fundamental civil rights are respected through the Office of Civil Rights in the Justice Department is long overdue in this area. We've had Heller now for how many decades, and really just many jurisdictions, states, and localities discriminating openly against people's gun rights. And it's appropriate for the federal government when, there are only 3 federal crimes delineated in the Constitution. It's piracy, treason on the high seas, and counterfeiting. And many of us limited government activists would like us to go back to those 3. But if there's one place that I think we can agree there is a place for federal intervention, is especially when the states and local governments are discriminating against the people and violating their fundamental rights. And that's what this office has been used for in the past, for all manner of things. And it's great to see that guns hopefully are going to be, very much included in the body of rights, that they're looking out for protection and to make sure that Americans' rights are being upheld, and when not, to go in there and do something about it.
It's absolutely. It's really fascinating, isn't it? That the thought process that the thought processes that are happening across the country now. So you have people who claim to be, civil rights champions when it comes to things like race or gender or sexuality, and they are aghast that, well, hang on, here is an enumerated right within the Constitution, number 2, I might add, on the Bill of Rights there. And you have, but that's not been receiving the protection as a civil right. And people don't talk about it in the language of a civil right, do they?
No, not except for usually gun rights activists.
Of course.
Who have been desperate to get it included in that conversation, because it's those rights that are respected. If a right is not defended or prosecuted in this case, then what good is it? If you have the right to keep and bear arms, but any county commissioner or mayor or governor or state can discriminate against those rights, and you have little to no recourse because of it being a state or local matter, or if you have to bear the cost of the challenge yourself, the litigation isn't cheap, then it becomes a lesser than right. And so what we're talking about here is that the Department of Justice under Donald Trump's direction will now be handling the Office of Civil Rights under that department will now be handling effrontery to the right to keep and bear arms by states and localities as the violation of civil rights. It'd be the same as if they discriminated against, or maybe not the same in terms of maybe a little more urgency. I was going to say the same if they openly said, we're not going to hire any black people, or for something like that. But the idea is those are both civil rights and both need to be protected by the federal government, because local and state governments often trample on those rights. So that's why we need the federal watchdog, and it's a great thing to see. I wonder why Trump didn't do it when he was president the first time.
Actually, I've been thinking about that, and I suspect that part of the reason is the New York Rifle and Pistol versus Bruin decision from the Supreme Court, and that really, because up until that case was decided, there hadn't really been any big movement on Second Amendment rights until that point, and that was really, for me, and for you, I'm sure too, it was really a very bright line ruling that the rights of gun owners need to be protected, and that people within these locations should be doing their best to adhere to the constitutional protections afforded. But before that, there wasn't, right? Or maybe.
Well, let me just stop you right there, and sure. I'll disagree with you. Bruin, and I'm not disagreeing with you with your sayings about Bruin, but I would just tell you that for a motivated administration, not having Bruin on the books is no impediment. Heller, D.C. versus Heller, and I'm actually looking right now, and I don't like to do this, but I'm going to get the name up, or the year up here, so we accurately quote it. 2008 Supreme Court case. Yeah. I don't think after Heller you can make an argument that a motivated administration couldn't add to the Justice Department's Civil Rights Office a contingent for gun right. In fact, the motivated kind of activist type of Justice Department for gun rights that a lot of gun enthusiasts and gun rights activists want would have been kind of turbocharged by that impetus had Trump or any other president done it, previous to now. But better late than never, I suppose, and hopefully it'll actually have some teeth, and they'll do something about it. Part of the problem is policy is personnel in this regard. If they have a pit bull who's talented and has some freedom and can go after some of these states, well, we'll really see some change, I think. And if not, then not. I can tell you that without question, the Office of Civil Rights at the Justice Department can move mountains when it comes to state and local decision-making and policy. They very often go into states and cities when there's discrimination. And the discrimination, by the way, need not be stated discrimination. It can be just as the effects are. So if there's no policy by a city to not hire black people, for instance, just happens that they don't have any on the books. Well, the Office of Civil Rights may go in and say, well, we believe you're discriminating, and here's what you're going to do to cure that discrimination. Even absent a court order,
Yes.
cities and states are afraid of the litigation because of the massive power that the Justice Department has to bear and bring on these cases. So it's kind of funny, actually, if you think about like an individual person fighting the federal government, that's terribly daunting, right? You may think that a city or a state would not have that trepidation, but they do. And the Office of Civil Rights is well known for using that to get what they call consent decrees. And if you ever just are bored and want some help sleeping, you can Google up Justice Department consent decree with a city, and you'll see very often they include things such as like I recently saw one about overcrowding in a city jail, for instance. What's your recourse if you're in a city jail and it's overcrowded to the point of violating your civil rights? Well, if the state court doesn't give you any help, you may go to the feds and they can impose, or the Justice Department, and they can impose by consent. In other words, they go to a city and they say, you're doing X, we think X is violative of the civil rights, we're going to do something about it, unless you agree now to do these 14 things to mollify or cure. And so that happens very often in these other areas. And if we get a full-throated defense of gun rights from this office, we can hopefully look forward to that kind of a defense of gun rights as well.
We're going to be back with Scott after this short break, discussing just what right actions the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division might be leaping into. We'll be back in a second.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.